milk, according to nutrition experts, is rich in nutrients and antibodies which help prevent early childhood diseases like pneumonia and diarrhea, and greatly boost infants' chances of survival by protecting them from infections. To underscore the importance of breast milk to human survival, the World Health Organization (WHO) recommends exclusive breastfeeding of babies for the first 6 months of life and continuous breastfeeding with appropriate complementary food up to 2 years of age or beyond. Now, despite these basic health recommendations and huge advantage of breastfeeding, only 42% of total babies in the world receive breast milk in the first hour of birth. Now, in Nigeria, statistics show that 3 out of every 4 babies are said not to be exclusively breastfed, and the trend contributes to child mortality, accounting for the deaths of more than 100,000 children annually from preventable diseases. What factors prevent Nigerian mothers from practicing exclusive breastfeeding? Has the World Breastfeeding Week, observed every first week of August, helped to address the problem? These are the issues as Nigeria Today looks at the topic of breastfeeding. Welcome to the program. I am Joy Oseago. To discuss the issue at hand, we have 2 guests in the studio. First, we welcome Clementina Okoro, a nutrition officer with the Federal Capital Territory Administration. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio today.
My pleasure.
Also in the studio is Lillian Ajamog. She is the communications officer of a non-governmental organization known as Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition in Nigeria. Thank you, Lillian, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting CS onto the program.
All right. Let's start with Clementina Okoro. Now, what is the composition of breast milk and what value does it add to babies? That there's always this emphasis that people must make sure they adhere to the rules of exclusive breastfeeding.
Yeah, breastfeeding is very, very important, and that is why the World Health Assembly has recommended a whole week set aside for the promotion, for the protection, and the support of breastfeeding. And then talking about the benefits are so numerous. It has lots of immunological benefits because it's the first vaccine that any child gets. It contains lots of antibodies. Then it's also physiological because that is the best food for the baby that helps the child to survive and to grow optimally. And then it's also emotional. It has emotional benefits or psychological benefits. Let's put it that way. The mothers get lots of satisfaction when they breastfeed. There's bonding. There's other social benefits attached to it. And then going back to physiological as well, it helps to prevent lots of non-communicable diseases or chronic diseases. Let's put it that way. Both to the child, because studies have shown that children that are breastfed, especially when they're breastfed as recommended, that is breastfed starting with putting the child to breast, that is initiating breastfeeding within the first 30 minutes of life. That is the national recommendation. Globally, it's within 1 hour. And then once the child is put to breast, within that first 30 minutes, the child receives the first breast milk, which is the colostrum. The colostrum lasts for about about 3 days, the first 3 days. So that's going to your question about composition now. It has we have the early part of the breast milk, which is largely the colostrum, and then furthermore for other days it gets, the colostrum is deep in color, it's yellowish or some some people call it bad, dirty milk. Let me put it, in a layman's language. But it is nutrient dense because it contains lots of antibodies, lots of immunoglobulins that will help to protect the child.
All right, let's bring Lillian quickly into the conversation. Let's hear her own views about breast milk, its importance, and the conversation.
Talking about breast milk itself, one key composition that most Nigerians or that most mothers and caregivers are actually not aware of is the fact that breast milk in itself contains 88% of water. And then you discover that they don't know, they are not aware of this composition, this particular important key composition of breast milk. And then because of breastfeeding, they breastfeed and also administer water without knowing that breast milk in itself contains all the water, 88% of water that the child requires. It is in breast milk. Also, like she has said, it contains all the adequate nutrients that is necessary for the optimal development of a child. Giving a child breast milk from age 0 up till 6 months is actually key if that child is going to attain optimal growth and development, and also his or her potentials as an adult. So that is one key composition that Nigerians need to understand and know today that breast milk has. It has all the water that your child requires, so you do not need to give breast milk and give additional water. It has all the nutrients that will protect your child from diseases and then also help the child to grow and develop optimally.
All right, thank you very much, Lillian. Clementina, so let's look at Nigeria's current statistics in terms of breastfeeding. Where are we?
At the moment, going by the most recent research results, that is the multiple indicator cluster survey 2017, Nigeria exclusive breastfeeding rate is at 23.7%.
Is that good?
Oh, well, we are making some progress, though not as much as we would really love to. We can go on a better, faster rate. Because if we really want to look at it, if we want to compare ourselves to some of our neighboring countries, take for instance Ghana. Ghana is at 67%. And then we all started, this on the same, pedestal. So if Ghana, our neighbors, an African country too, can get up to about 67 or thereabout, then we are still at 23. It's not really good enough. And Nigerians need to do better in this area. And then what are we really what are we really looking at? It has to do with lots of sensitization. Mothers need to really know the benefits of breastfeeding, and then the cost of, the drawbacks of a child not getting the desired breast milk, because if the mother don't know the benefits.
We'll come to the drawbacks. I want us to dwell more on this issue of enlightenment and advocacy. I mean, we've talked about the importance of breast milk to children. Why is it that mothers are not aware? Where is that problem coming from? If it has to do with the issue of advocacy, Lillian, where do we drop the problem? On whose table do we drop this challenge? Who is responsible for creating the necessary awareness?
Okay, I think there are so many stakeholders involved in this. The caregivers, talking about the mothers, the fathers, the healthcare providers themselves are involved. The government also has a role to play and also can be held accountable for this, as well as the civil society organizations. Now, looking at the caregivers, the mother is a caregiver. The issue with the mother or the person breastfeeding is one issue of non-awareness, or should I just say, okay, the lack of awareness of what exclusive breastfeeding is all about and the benefits. For instance, like I can't go to my village to tell my grandmother or a relative that I want to exclusively breastfeed a child, and giving just breast milk without adding water or those local herbs and all of that. She'll be like, oh, you're just being wicked to this child. The issue of lack of awareness, most Nigerian mothers or some are not aware of what exclusive breastfeeding is. They are not aware of how to go about early initiation after delivery, and then they do not embrace. If you're not aware of something, then you can't even know what the benefits are. So that's one key issue. Then on the part of other care providers, like for instance, breastfeeding mothers don't get enough support from family members. It takes a whole lot to exclusively breastfeed a child. You find a woman breastfeeding and then she has to drag along 3 elder children and all of that. And then there's also the issue of we do not have breastfeeding friendly policies in the country. That is where the government actually comes in. Breastfeeding friendly policies are not they are not being implemented in Nigeria. Talking about, for instance, the issue of maternity leave for nursing mothers.
You know what, Lillian, we'll get to that quickly.
Okay.
I want to go to Clementina now. There's an issue you raised, and I'm just thinking, you know, in my village, I know there are many women. In the past, when I was younger and we used to go to our village regularly every year, there are women who were breastfeeding their children to the age of 5. And it was exclusive. So when you talk about the issue of awareness, I'm wondering here, where, how, when? Hasn't it got to do with globalization? You know, is it not that women are thinking of getting trendy and all that? Because how do you explain the case of that woman in the village who was breastfeeding her child to the age of 5 exclusively?
Oh, well, urbanization, yes, to some extent, yes. However, like in Nigeria today, Nigerian women actually breastfeed. They breastfeed predominantly. The only issue is that they don't, most of them don't breastfeed exclusively. Well, in terms of breastfeeding, yes, they breastfeed. And then in those days,
could that be as a result of some of the issues Lillian raised?
Yeah.
Working mothers and all that?
Yeah, well, yes, working mothers is part of it, because if the environment is not enabling, like if they don't, like if there are no crèches or lactation rooms in workplaces, then the mother will not really want to, you know, carry his or her child, her child to the office, because there's no suitable place where she can keep the child. But if in workplaces, if we have lactation rooms or crèches within the work environment, then the mother would be encouraged to take that child.
To actually take us back to the community. You know what is obtainable, like say 20 years ago, is not what's happening now. There's been this change of role among men and women. Like back in the days, it's just known that a woman has to stay back at home and do the household chores and all of that. But even in the villages, women are actually taking up roles, because, you know, there's poverty in the land and people have to actually fend for their families. So you discover that as the fathers are going to the farm, the women are also going to the farm. Talking about the urbanization itself now, trickling down to our rural areas. Yeah, they have to go to the farm, and then they also go to, from the farm, they take their farm proceeds to sell, because they have to support their husbands. So that period they stay on to sell and all of that. You can imagine taking a child to a marketplace and all of that. So that's where the disconnect comes from what is obtainable years back, and then what's happening now, even in the rural areas and in the urban areas.
Thank you, Lillian. Clementina, so what is our exclusive breastfeeding target in Nigeria? Let's even look at that aspect. Do we have a target?
Oh, why not?
So what is it?
Of course, we have our target. Nigeria has our target.
What is
at least our target is that we would at least scale up by the year 20. Okay, like going by the National Strategic Plan of Action, the NSPAM. Our target then, but which would end by 2019. Our target was to scale up by 50%, going by our current indices. However, we can go beyond that. Of course, 2019 is just around the corner. That's next year.
And we're so far away from the target.
Anyway, but there's always room for improvement with lots of collaborative efforts. The promotion of breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, is really the role of everyone.
All right, we'll take a short break. We'll come back and continue with the conversation. It's sounding quite interesting. You're watching Nigeria Today, and we're discussing exclusive breastfeeding by mothers in Nigeria. It's the week. So let's go to the streets briefly to feel the pulse of mothers on the matter.
When you breastfeed your baby for 6 months without giving that child water, it will help that child to be very strong, and that child will not fall sick. And I can see it's my first issue, so it's very good, and I encourage other mothers to do that.
There's no child that undertake this breastfeeding system. When you see the child, you know that is well taken care of.
Breastfeeding is good for the kids. I know there are some nutrients in the body that it can give to the kids, which will help their brain and all the part of the body to grow very well.
So when a child or a baby breastfeed or take breast, the brain is complete.
Breastfeeding, very, very essential for child and mother bonding.
Thank you for staying with us. We just heard the views of some mothers, and we also saw a gentleman there, so we can't say just mothers, on the issue of exclusive breastfeeding. And we still have with us in the studio Clementina Okoro of the Federal Capital Territory Nutrition Office, and Lillian Ajamong, Communications Officer of a non-governmental organization known as Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition in Nigeria. Now, let me start with you, Lillian. Listening to the clip there, is it still safe to say people are not aware, or is it still safe to say the issue of advocacy is responsible for lack of exclusive breastfeeding?
Awareness is in two phases. You could actually be aware of something, but not aware of whether what you know is right or wrong. From the clips we've just watched, what I've picked from it is that people are actually aware of breastfeeding. Nigerian mothers and even men, to a large extent, understand what breastfeeding is and then how its relevance and importance to a child's development. But that they might not be aware of what exclusive breastfeeding is. And that is where the disconnect is. That is why we're having issues of malnutrition and all of that, like the issues that are attached to not exclusively breastfeeding a child. So from this clip, yes, they know that the child has to breastfeed. In Nigeria, we breastfeed, but I can say that to some extent, we do not exclusively breastfeed, which is why our percentage is at 23 points. Thereabouts, yes.
All right, thank you, Lillian. Clementina, so it's safe to say that although people are aware, the thing is somebody might breastfeed her own baby for a month, some two, and some one. And then some people, I've heard a couple of mothers say, oh, I don't want to do exclusive breastfeeding because I don't want this sagging of the breast and all that. Is that a good reason?
Oh, well, awareness, knowledge, attitude and practice. These are, different issues. Yeah, and these are the issues. One can have the knowledge, but have a negative attitude to it, and and that would make the person not to practice the what is recommended.
It's like having a good policy but not implementing.
That is it. So, like issues of sagging breast, is funny, and it is also to some extent lack of awareness in terms of how looking at the breasts, like the composition of the breast itself, what is responsible for keeping the breast firm. It's because, well, at a young age you have lots of fatty tissues that hold up the breast, and when aging comes, it's a natural process. Those fatty tissues will then break down, and then the breast will naturally tilt down. It will fall. So whether she suckles the baby or not, the breast will eventually fall. And then also because of lack of awareness, she doesn't know the benefits attached to breastfeeding.
Even to the mother.
To the mother. I'm talking about, even the benefit to the mother, such as those physiological benefits I talked about. Science, evidence have shown that a mother that breastfeeds her child has less chances of developing breast cancers or ovarian cancers, for instance. And because she's not knowledgeable, she thinks that it is being fashionable, not to breastfeed, whereas it may actually predispose her to ill health later in life.
All right, let me bring in the new plan by the Federal Ministry of Health. This one that says that they're planning to increase this number of months of maternity leave to 6 months. For me, that's a good development, because take some Western countries, like Canada, for instance. Women are given a whole year, and men are given 4 months of paternity leave to support their wives. So what do you think about this plan, and how would it encourage exclusive breastfeeding in Nigeria? Let's start with you, Lillian.
Okay, let me use this opportunity on behalf of CSON to actually commend the Minister of Health for making that pronouncement at the just concluded World Breastfeeding Week. When it came, we were excited, because the issue of maternity leave is actually one that has been stalling the attainment of exclusive breastfeeding to some extent in Nigeria. Yes, like as it is now, it stands at 4 months for the public, those in the public service. But you get to discover that even in some private organizations and sectors, some women don't even have access to such leaves, and then in some it's even 3 months. And then since one requires 6 months to exclusively breastfeed a child, this pronouncement is actually a step in the right direction, because if Nigeria makes it a law that women would now be entitled to 6 months leave at workplaces to exclusively breastfeed their children, and then also follow through to ensure that such policies are implemented, I bet you that in the next few years we will not be talking about the indices or the present statistics that our EBF rates are actually showing. So it is a step in the right direction. I want to use this opportunity to urge government to go beyond saying it, to act and then ensure that this is implemented.
All right, let's go to Clementina now. Let's hear your views on these, and also to hear from you if it's also necessary to have paternity leave in Nigeria.
Oh, very well. Honestly, it's heart gladdening, and then that is just the right way to go, because anything that will help to promote, to protect, and to support breastfeeding, that is what we desire. Because when the mother is given 6 months maternity leave, of course that period she has time to stay with her baby, and there's nothing that will really discourage her from practicing the exclusive breastfeeding. From researches that we've conducted, some mothers actually want to carry on the exclusive breastfeeding for up to 6 months, but the excuses they would mention is because that they have to resume work, especially in private sectors. You see that some of the private sectors don't have such enabling environment. So with the Honorable Minister of Health's pronouncements, it's really going to help mothers to practice exclusive breastfeeding. And for the paternity leave, of course, the fathers also need time to stay home and provide support. Even like the Lagos State has already kickstarted that they started with 10 days paternity leave. So it's really a good one, and then it's encouraging for the rest of Nigeria.
I hope men will like that.
I'm sure.
All right, Lillian, let's have your closing thoughts on this matter. How can the general public help support nursing mothers generally, not just fathers or members of the immediate family?
Okay, when we say general public, I want to start with the healthcare providers, because it's assumed that that's a woman's first port of call during and immediately after delivery. So they have a key role to play in the area of nutrition education. So it is very, very key that even in the course of antenatal care and visits and all of that, that they provide these women with adequate nutrition education that would enable them to exclusively breastfeed their children. Then also the issue of early initiation also lies with healthcare providers. They have a role to play. A woman delivers a child and then she feels too weak, wants to rest. You can bring that child to the woman and then encourage her, show her the various positionings and all of that. That is one aspect for healthcare providers.
All right, we might not have time to take the rest. Time is against us. So I want to thank you, Lillian Ajamong, Communications Officer of a non-governmental organization known as Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition in Nigeria. I want to thank you very much for coming on our program today. We also like to thank Clementina Okoro, who is a nutrition officer with the Federal Capital Territory Administration. Thank you very much for your contributions. And that's the much we can take on the program today. We urge you to join us tomorrow for another interesting edition. Till then, I am Joy Usiago on behalf of the crew, thanking you for your time. Have a good evening.